Here's Jason with the Jason and Peely Project. Super excited to have Louis Kim today. Louis Kim, he's got so much going on, and funny enough, we've run in so many of the same circles.
Yeah.
Yet we've actually not met face to face, and it got to the point here where we're actually knowing Louis more from what he's doing on this personal side, on this progression side of going out there and really just transforming himself, really just day by day. And I started to see him because we did 75 hard together. I think that was where we first saw the notion here is we were doing 75 hard, which you can listen to prior podcasts, but you're doing 2 workouts a day. You're eating healthy, you're eating clean, you're reading a book. You're really just putting yourself in a momentum, and you do this for 75 days. And there's no failure across the mold. And then what really caught me past that is you've not only had this great weight transformation that you talk about very openly to everyone out there, but you also have this point here where you now have built this social media presence that's just incredible. And you've touched so many people. So Louis, I know I gave a wide landscape, but why don't you fill in the gaps, give me a little more about who you are and what you're doing.
Well, Jason, I mean, I appreciate you having me on here. And it's so funny that, like, we were just talking before we started this, how we have met face to face, but there seems to be like a bond, right, that was building over time. And I think it comes from this place of just the mindset, right? The drive and the desire to push yourself and grow. Most of my life, it's been in small business. My first small business I had was a franchise when I was 22, 23. That was something that was flipped fairly quickly, did really well. And then I got my real estate license and sold real estate, did really well. And so through the years, and then built other businesses. And then in the past few years, it's been full-time investing in real estate, rentals, vacation rentals. And then I'm also a licensed broker. And you know, through real estate is actually how we got connected through a mastermind. And it's so funny that we were friends on Facebook, didn't really talk, and then 75 Hard starts, and you realize there's somebody that you can relate to. And then I think I've watched you post stuff with your training for an ultra or for a marathon, and I was like, I really appreciated the mindset you're coming from. So I find it's kind of funny in this day and age how technology has allowed this digital bond to become like a real one, you know? So
yeah, well, it's the cool thing about society, even where we're at today, right? So we're all dealing with this thing going on, right? Of course, you know, coronavirus. However, we're all dealing with it separately, but at least we have the availability to still have this contact. If you take this and we do this 30 years ago, right? Just the chain of communication completely dropped off, and hopefully this opens up the channel where people can steer themselves away from having too much mental distress. But really the attitude and the focus you put out there is that you're just getting it done still. And so much is being lost right now within people that, you know, they're really just letting go not only of themselves or their routines, and they have to fight the mold. So talk to me about what you do in your daily progression and really what you're working towards today.
Well, so when it comes to the physical aspect of things, I mean, I started documenting, you know, my weight loss on Instagram and then TikTok, and started building an audience. And it really was done very selfishly, right? It started with the thing where I was just trying to document and use it as an extra level of accountability. And then you start getting messages from people about like how it's inspiring, how it's helping them. And that's been kind of a weird thing still. But, you know, even without all of that, it's always just been about like day to day. I always on there, I post about grinding, right? It's just like, there's this idea that everything happens instantly, right? And that everything is perfect and simple. You know, the action is simple, but you really do have to just day in, day out do it, right? I mean, the most frequent question that I get from people, especially people that are younger, is like, how do you stay motivated? And I'll always just tell them, I was like, listen, I think what you're talking about is inspiration, right? And you're not going to be inspired for very long. Like, you have to be disciplined, and you have to go do it on the days that you don't want to do it. And so even right now in this time and in this place, like, you can say, I'm not going to work out, or you use all the excuses in the world. But the truth is if you really want to find a way, you'll find a way. It's why, you know, you and I last weekend had the insane idea that doing 1,000 burpees in 24 hours was a good idea. Right. But we did it because the idea is that it doesn't matter the circumstances, right? It's like, you're in a place and you've got to control what you can control. And what we could control is, well, I'm going to still find a way to push myself mentally, even though I can't go to the gym. I don't have an awesome sled. I don't have the turf. I don't have all those things, right? Like, literally, I think you were in your backyard. I was in my living room, right? And the funny thing is the floor. I'm pretty sure on my floor in my place that from the sweat And from, I'm still a pretty big guy, from hitting the same crease over and over, there's like a little bump there now. So.
Oh, jeez, that's awesome. But that's determination, that's
Yeah.
dedication right there. The floor now knows its mark, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, no,
yeah.
but the funny thing is that every time I've stepped my foot on that spot now, it's like it's just like a neuro response where I can feel it
Yeah.
again, that hey, I did this thing right there,
Yeah.
As much as I want to fix it, there's a part of me like I just want to leave it.
Yeah, that's awesome. It comes down to just having your new story, right? So, because people say, well, how do you do it? Well, you just make it that this is what you do. And
Yeah,
that's really the point right here. Because these perfect ideal situations, and I think not only for the weight loss, but for anything, right? For starting a business,
yeah,
for going
exactly.
out there, talking to a girl, it's all you want, this like perfect environment, but it never comes, right? And that's why you have 99% of people will sit in the sideline. But really what we want is that it just takes getting out there and doing it. Like the burpee thing. Okay, if you couldn't do a burpee, we said just do anything, because
Yeah.
anything is better than just sitting there just motionless. And really, for you, what have you found was that the pinnacle point where you just said, okay, I'm going to start this journey for weight loss? Like where do you remember, was there a switch you just said, okay, enough's enough, I'm going for this?
Well, so from my heaviest, when I was over 400 pounds, I was in a doctor's office, and the week leading up to it, like thirst, like I didn't know where it was coming from. I mean, the only thing that would satisfy this craving was something sweet. So I was like chugging like 60 ounces of like a fountain soda, right? And not just like a Coke, but like, like orange soda or like fruit punch, like the sweetest thing possible, right? And I had no idea that it essentially developed type 2 diabetes. And so I went to the doctors, they do a blood test, and the doctor just sits there and like very blankly looks at me, and about as distant as she could be. It was just like, you're going to die if you go on this path and you need to lose weight. And she didn't really give me a plan or anything. I remember like really being unhappy with that. And I think I cried in that meeting, and I left. And then it really just started with royally just a middle finger to the doctor because of
Mm.
how it was handled. And so to some degree, I have to thank that doctor, but that really set me on a path where I got tired of that feeling, and you just start going. And the thing is like, it's just like, when you're going into the multifamily space for the first time, I'm sure you had no idea where to even begin, but you just begin, right? Like,
Yeah.
so that's kind of how it was for me, where it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I know I need to move more, right?
Yeah.
And I need to change what I eat. And it's just, you start going on that path and you figure it out, and just over time, it's that constant need to keep pushing. And I think that's why you find yourself progressing to being someone who can't control or has diabetes and is so thirsty, and because of the blood sugar, their insulin, that they're drinking 60 ounces of orange soda, which is like just awful, right?
Yeah.
To then saying, hey, Jason, I think a good idea is let's do 1,000 burpees, right? Like,
But you think about that, you see how the snowball begins to build, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
it just starts to get into going. I had the luck at one point in my life. It is it was 2021, and I was personal training. I don't know how I got into it or where it even just came from, but I had the luck of there was 3 people, and that I really found a core niche of just helping people get a routine and losing weight. I had 3 people lose between 80 and 100 pounds. It was some of the
wow,
best feeling. But what I found from that is that usually, and this doesn't of course cross parallel, but what I found was that it usually part 3 things. It was that, one, that they just never had a plan, so they didn't know where to start, right?
yeah,
2 was they just had really awful eating habits and just didn't know any other way. Or 3, they would push themselves to the point that they would expect results. And this would go trainers too, right? I'd see
yeah,
trainers just beat people down to the point that they were going to be sore for like 2 weeks, right? And that almost pushes you off from ever coming back.
yeah,
It's just making that mix where you can have something that you build into. And weight loss is one of these deceiving points, right? Because the first while when you do it, right, you're building muscle, and the muscle weighs more than fat. So you're
yeah,
actually,
yeah,
you feel like you're plateauing from the start, even when you're feeling better. So it's this hard mental block to get yourself past, because as you start it, you're almost to this point where you think you're feeling better, but the numbers telling you different.
yeah.
But then when you hold it, you see what you're doing. I mean, it's just tremendous. What would have been some of the hurdles throughout the process that have surprised you?
In terms of being surprised, I think um, the biggest surprise, at least with this, because look, I've struggled with my weight my whole life, and the last 2 years of it, and so I've gone up and down a big chunk of my life, but like the last 2 years being, late 30s, early 40s, the biggest surprise for me was just how my body doesn't respond the same way. So I've had to get smarter. And the ironic part about that is I've never had a problem pushing myself physically. It's always been nutrition. I mean, it would make sense why you would gain weight again, right? But this time around, really pushing myself, the nutrition part of it is like, so it has to be a whole, it's the nutrition, it's sleep. Whereas before I could sleep 4 hours, I could go work out, and I could work out like 3 times a day, not stretch, not do any mobility, not do any of that stuff, and just keep going the next day. And that's just not the case now. And so I guess the lesson and what I have now is the understanding, I tell this to younger guys who want to lose weight all the time, is that when you're younger, you have your entire life ahead of you. So choose that path of sustainability. And so I'm pretty hard-headed, and I'm pretty, so I think that's what it's taken this long to really understand that it's all those pieces together, right? Because the thing that at the end of the day is weight loss is more about hormones than it is, the caloric balance, right? Like it's the hormones, it's your insulin, it's your ghrelin, it's all of those hormones that control your weight loss and your cortisol levels. So everything you're doing is to control that, and so it is definitely more of a holistic approach, and just you have control over it than you realize.
So when you think about that and you part it all together, I mean, you're absolutely right, because the workout is just one key piece, right? It's just like if you have 2 feet and workout is one and diet's the other, right? And for that, it's just gain that clarity about what you want. And sometimes the hardest thing is, I think New Year's resolutions is like the worst case scenario, right? Because people go to these extremes that you can't last. So you have to find a way to build that in. And what I found, even for myself, is like, instead of just saying, okay, I mean, like now, like, more disciplined, I can just go, cold turkey for whatever, right? It just, okay, cool, we'll do it. But before, you had to find a way where you just lessen it, right? Instead of eating a plate, you leave, one thing on the plate, or something of that magnitude where you continue to build it in. Like I had one guy, and he would say that he would go to McDonald's and he would buy 2 meals, get 2 drinks, just so he didn't look like he was eating them both himself. And the plan was, okay, well, you know what? Let's just take 1 drink away, and then each time just take that 1 drink away, even if it's the middle point, because that just takes those calories out. But you get that process here, is you just start having to back it out little by little, because of the shock to the system is where you ultimately fall out. Like the New Year's resolution is like, every day should be a resolution. You should have a resolution that you're continuing to get better at pushing yourself. And for you really are doing some crazy workouts, and you push some weight. I see you pushing some weight. What's some of the most favorite, what's some of the favorite exercises that you like doing?
I don't like doing any of it.
That's why truth is good, man.
Like I'm an inherently lazy person. Like if I could be like in amazing shape and feel good by sitting on my couch and like playing video games, I probably would, but I can't. And so then I have to go push myself. I find the workouts that are mentally the toughest are the ones that I appreciate the most. Like there's one that I've done twice thus far, where it's like a trap bar, and it's not a lot of weight. It's 225, and you do a farmer's carry with it, but you do 10 deadlifts on each end of the farmer's carry. But you do it so that you do 100 total deadlifts. So it's at 5, it's like 1 back and forth, it's 10 laps and then 10 deadlifts. But like, it is physically a tough one, but it's mentally just excruciating. It's just like the 1,000 burpees we're doing, right? Like, I mean, you gave some of the best advice when we were doing the Goggins, the 4x4x48, where it's like, look, you start it, then you're doing it, and then it's over. And so like that deadlift workout is very much like that. So any workout that has that type of mental grind to it, where it's like pushing you just far enough, but then you have to sustain that for an extended period of time, those are the ones that I like a lot. So usually like kettlebells, high volume work, that really gets me. And it's all because I know there's probably 100 times where I just want to give up. And it's like, it's not giving up, it's that David Goggins 1 second, like that 1 second that defines you, and having that opportunity to always be like, no, I'm going to keep going.
You got to tell your mind it's done. And that's how I found is my points is that, I got to walk into these, because, like if I go and one day, like I want a max bench and I put up like 315, but if I've already told my mind doubt, I'm not going to do it. It's
Yeah.
already done in my mind. And so like, doing 100 miles, I was done with that race before I started. And I didn't start like that, but that's what I had to get myself to know, is that, your mind, your body goes farther than your mind. Your mind is going to stop everything
Yeah.
from happening. And you have to keep tricking your mind to tell it why it needs to keep going.
That's so key what you said there, though, about like the fact that it's done. It's so that belief has got to be first, right? It's like even in business, right? When you start a business, yeah, you prepare for contingency, you prepare for everything,
Hmm.
but then a pandemic breaks out. Like you can't plan for that, right?
Yeah.
But like if you're certain and you start with that certain sense of certainty about what you're doing, the belief is what starts it, right? But then it's the action of moving and going that reaffirms that belief, that keeps pushing you and you keep going to it. And it's the same thing in business, right? Like when you start a business, when Jeff Bezos started Amazon, I mean, he started with a sense of certainty that this website was going to sell a bunch of books, and it was like, who would have thought, right, that it was turning into the thing now where like I think there'd be bigger riots if Amazon went away over like a prolonged quarantine. But
Yeah.
it's the same thing for me in this weight change, is that I felt like an athlete long before my weight and my performance started to show it, right? And this surprised me all the time with recording this, is the way I felt in a movement and the way it looked were never the same. Like I would record something and be like, man, that feels awesome. I feel awesome. And I look and be like, whoa, like that's really bad actually, but it's just like, it's that belief that's there, right? Like you're visualizing what it is before. So,
Well, you're talking your mind into it, right? I was actually listening
exactly.
to, we had David Melcher on the podcast, and he talks about creating your alter ego, and your alter ego stands for, and he's talking more about cold calling. Like some people just really like, we don't want to pick up the phone because we're so effective. We just hate hearing no, right? And so at that point, creating your alter ego of what you want to, even if it's not there yet, allows you to take these points, and you've done that with yourself right there. So you talked a little bit about small business. You've had your success in the past. Looking at what's happening out there right now with all these small businesses really at a standstill or struggling or having to find other ways. You got any thoughts that come to mind about ways that people can continue to bring value for their business and hopefully get over this hurdle?
I think the biggest challenge that most small businesses face, and I don't think most people understand, is that so many small businesses operate on razor thin margins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those razor thin margins make it possible to exist day in and day out, maybe take a nice paycheck, but it's your company, but not necessarily sock away a ton of money and build substantial wealth. Like you have a business and it's growing, but you're living off of cash flow as opposed to sort of accumulated wealth. I mean, there's a historic landmark chain here in DC called Ben's Chili Bowl. And there was just an article posted today that they are potentially on the brink of having to close their doors forever.
Wow.
And within the last 6 or 7 years, they went from 1 or 2 locations that were in DC. I mean, their place on U Street existed during the riots in the 70s. And it was the place where like the cops and the rioters would go and they would just forget about the divide that they were going through. And then they would have a chili hot dog and fries and hamburger, and they'd settle their beefs there. And then it would go back out on the street. Like it's historic. And they're talking about like they've closed all their other stores temporarily except U Street. And the owners say that they're not sure how much longer they can keep going because they got to keep paying salaries and do that. And it's universal, I think, with small businesses. I think the value that a small business can place is doing everything they can to sort of keep their key people, like keep their key people in place so that they can provide as much of a service as they can. I know it's very hard in this environment, but then it's also understanding like, where are you going to be a month from now and what's the new face? Like your business may not exist in its current form, but how are you going to come out of this as a new version, right? Like there are things like restaurants in DC, because the carry out end of their business, just, it wasn't covering their costs. They've had to be creative, and they've done things like one restaurant is doing take home meals where they package all the recipes. They make their sauce, which is like the key part that we can't do at home. And they're packaging them and selling them at like 20 or $22 a meal for 2 people, right? Or others have converted it to like a market, so it's it's finding those ways that you continue just to make enough revenue to keep things going, so you can get out on the other end of this. But on the other end of it, you've got to be prepared for the fact that your business could look very different than what it is today.
And those are super points, right? And the razor thin margins is one that, when this does reside, if you're still in business, you really need to take a hard line at your operations, because it's a point here where you can't go into defense mode.
Yeah.
Right. Because you can't get so scared that you're going to just constantly play defense,
Yeah.
but you have to look at where you were before, what really, besides, and not blame coronavirus. Right. So that's the easy blame. Okay. We're going to blame coronavirus and say that that's a point. And unfortunately it's here, but how going forward can we set up to take advantage of it? And the restaurants doing those things, maybe when you get back, because the hardest thing is, like, you go back and you just lost, your income for a month, 2 months, or whatever. It's not like you go back and people are going to be in double coming into the store. Right. You're going to be probably at a discount, like 50%, 60%. So of the other arms that you found, can you add that to your core business? Maybe you never had time to do social media presence. You never had time to do shipping and packaging. Maybe you never had time to do delivery. Hopefully they can build that into their business model and can help some people out to really get past this. But to be seen, right? And I think the hardest thing right now is that everybody's waiting for some clarity on an endpoint, and there's not going to be a clean break, right?
That's regardless of where a person stands politically. The uncertainty, right? Like, we're talking about the certainty in your belief. Like, the uncertainty is just, it's so toxic, right? Like, it's why companies are having to go with the layoffs that they are at the extent that they are, is because it seems like it's never going to end. Yeah, they're talking about April, but there's no drop dead date. And unfortunately, I'm sure a lot of the data here is or the decisions are based on data and predictions and modeling. Well, you and I both know, like, modelings are like plans, right? Like, they change constantly, so it's very hard to prepare to do that. And even more so as a small business, right? Like, as a mom and pop, your local spot, like, you weren't really forecasting 6 months down the road, because you were relying on foot traffic and your location and just the reoccurring business. So I think that uncertainty is the scariest part, and anything that, governors, mayors, they can do to just create a sense of certainty, even without the time of just that they've got a sense of control, I think makes a big difference. I give a huge shout out to the governor of Maryland, because I'm in DC. I'm in Virginia. DC, Maryland, Virginia are all very touched together. And so we get to see 3 different executives operating. And he has just done a really good job of just creating that sense of, like, control, being on top of things. He was very early on, and it makes a big difference in how people respond. Because I know the people, my friends that live in Maryland, they feel a lot less panicked than a lot of my friends in Virginia.
Interesting.
Which is weird. And that's, there's this rivalry between Maryland and Virginia, which is just, it's dumb. It's the Beltway rivalry, but, like, we're always talking about who's got the better state. It's probably kind of like Jersey and New York, right? But most people in Virginia will tell you that, like, oh yeah, Virginia's the better. But in this case, there's a lot of people that are very much envious of the leadership that's being held in Maryland, because it's just, there's a sense of, like, I feel good about who's in charge,
Yeah. And that's what people want. They want something to rest back on, that they can basically put their hat on and say, okay, and it will come, right? It will come. But ultimately, I think if we're focusing on waiting for that moment, it just creates so much. Like, right now, I had somebody the other day, just, passing when I was running, and he was just telling me how awful it is. And I was like, are you sick? He's like, no. Anyone sick around you? He's like, no. I was like, are you okay? Still put? Yeah. So I'm like,
it's all relative.
What's the issue, man? I was like, dude, that sounds freaking great. Like, you're at home for a little bit, and you're outside walking in the sun. So I don't want to commiserate with people. I just want people to know that this will pass. Hopefully no one's sick around you. Hopefully no one's, stressed around you, but everything comes, the sun shines another day, and we have hope that the next, great story will come from you or from someone else.
I'm curious, how are you all doing with the multifamily business with rents in April? And I'm curious, like, what other, your peers are talking, and how are things going? Is it very regional in terms of, or is it like that? Is it more like their asset class that is it dictating the percentage of rents that they're receiving?
My model has always been to make a better place to live for people. And what that comes down to here is, and so that's my, ownership style is I go in there and I don't jack around on people from day one. I go in there and improve the property, make this a better place to live, show people, I want families to stay there and move out. I find that finding the increase, if I could get 100 and instead I make this a better place to live and I keep people, in their beds and keep them, and maybe only increase it $50, although I'm losing a little on the front end, I'm saving on the cost of having people move and having the turnover and having the big cost for that, for the point there for being down on a unit. So we're not very far off from from last month's collection. We're actually doing very well. Ultimately, I think April is there was a lot of uncertainty and panic about April. I don't think April's the telling month. I think May is the telling month.
Yeah.
Because with May, if people had worked in March, they've ultimately had received some kind of payment, some kind of money for that point, that going into May, if they're still without going back to work and payment shut off and they're not working at home, and the stimulus money that comes out, middle of April has not found them yet, I think that's going to create a much tougher circumstance. So for us, we have really addressed everything we can with the tenants. There has been only 2 across a couple hundred units that have reached out that have expressed concerns, and one's already paid and the other, and we just came up on the 5th. Some of our tenants use that as the mile marker. That's when late fees would presumably be charged to go across there. But we're having good response for the tenants. We've given them the ability that if they need to pay partial payments, which we didn't do before, make it accessible so we're not having a cross contamination with, instead of them going to the leasing office, they can pay by credit card, pay online, pay ACH, send in a check, all these other means to make that easy. And also have cut down on doing large maintenance ticket items that aren't really in need right now. So if someone's blinds are broken, we're not going to go in there and have the maintenance guys interact with the tenant. We're going to save that for a moment. If there's a water leak or something of massive concerns, that will be corrected. Besides that, the one thing that I don't think a lot of operators may be thinking of is that you have to be very careful, because you're going from a point where generally you have people at home for, they're asleep for 8 hours and they're at home for maybe 4, 6, 7 hours. Mm-hmm. Now they're home for 24 hours. Your utility bills are going to go up. So you have to really think about your utility segment there, what to prepare for, because not only will you potentially receive a little bit less rent, but your utilities may skyrocket. And that's just because people are using the units more. So ultimately, my thought is we're going to continue to make this the best place for them to live. And with that mentality, hopefully we'll be able to work with tenants and help them get through all this, and they'll get back to their life, and we'll get back to running the properties as we should be.
Well, I think what you brought up there about your management or your ownership style, it's going to play such a role in the future of the economy of how it comes out, because it's not just landlords in the apartment space, right? Like how you've run the operation, how you treat your tenants, it'll get reciprocated, right? Like in how they treat the property. And you're always going to get the people, you're going to get the small percentage that would have banged it up regardless, right? But I think especially in the commercial space, you're gonna see the small businesses that are coming out that have the opportunity to get back on their feet and going, versus the ones that don't, especially the retail oriented ones, is really going to be so heavily contingent on who the landlords are and how those landlords handle those spaces. And unfortunately, there are going to be some landlords out there who are really cutting their own legs off, by not wanting to work with their tenant, because this is an unprecedented across the board thing. I was talking to a friend who has a gym, and they were doing okay, and it was a typical thing where like they were making money. I believe the husband is the one that runs the gym, and then the wife, she's got a full-time job, and so she's got a sort of like reduced workload, but they're still getting her salary. But the gym itself provided his income, but it didn't provide like substantial profits on top of that, right? And their landlord just doesn't want to work with them at all, and they're at a point where the liability of that is like, well, maybe it's better if we just close the gym, because they can't get any sort of, they just can't get any cooperation. And so it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out, it's unfortunate what we're dealing with.
It's nuts. And, it's one of these things where every different scenario will play out, and I can prepare, but I think this comes down to the other things too, is like, we just got to stay off the worst case scenario and just keep our minds to the point of, okay, what's the solution here? Right. And that's across the board. I was hearing so much panic across, and right, there could be complete draw from a lot of operators as to the way they are, there's everybody's at risk. But if we focus just on the risk and not on what we can do to get the process, you kind of get lost,
Well,
So,
it sounds like, I mean, from what you're explaining of what you all are doing, it's that you're very much, though, you've got empathy for the situation and circumstance, and in the long run, in this type of situation, trying to work something that makes it manageable for everybody is in the best interest of the whole, as opposed to getting into a pissing contest. I don't know if you've seen some of the letters that some apartment landlords have sent their tenants, but like, I don't see you sending some of those. Like, it's almost like you're admonishing a child about it. And then it's like, hey, this isn't just them not paying because they decided to pay their, buy a car, right? Like, this is a very different thing. So,
I mean, they're people first. And that's where I think the divide comes down to. This is not like it's people first, and ultimately it's still a business to run.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in that's the first and foremost. But on that point, this has to be an ability where we're either going to all get through this or nobody's going to get through this. And that's just the thought process where it is. And there's going to be across the board a lot of hurt out there that's just brought on by just the situation. And it will be interesting to see really where it goes. Like, if you have all these restaurants shut down, that's unfortunate, but maybe there's a group that can join together from these that can make something even better all together, or something that builds from there, where, the ability to prevail it will come. We're just going to have to see what that looks like. Right. So
yeah, I don't think anybody knows, right? That's the big thing. It's like, we don't know what it's going to look like.
So I would be just foolish to let you off without bringing up your social media presence, because it's impressive. It's impressive. But talk to me, man. Talk to me what you're doing, Daniel. Give me some advice. You are out there just making it happen.
Yes. So in Instagram, I started a little over a year ago. Instagram's steadily growing, but Instagram's definitely a much harder space to be in without a lot of production value. A lot of the followers I'm gaining now on Instagram are a direct result of TikTok, and TikTok, my audience is significantly larger than on Instagram. And the great thing about TikTok is that it really is a creator's platform where you just have to keep creating content, and the best thing about it is that it essentially has two lanes set up, right? There's the following, and then there's the For You. And so the For You page is all algorithmically driven. And so anyone can join TikTok, and anyone can take a piece of content and have 0 followers and then have 3-4 million people watch that piece of video. So that's what's great about it. And it's all based on the algorithm and what you do with it. And then you still have the other lane for your followers. But where we are, the organic reach is so high. Most of the content that you're seeing and the traffic you get is from the For You page. And so if anyone wants to build an audience, I would tell you that TikTok is the place to go. And if you don't know what it is, I still kind of don't know what it is. Like, you just have to spend time with it, check out other people's content, see what's there. And it's great because you can create a voice. And if you put out something that doesn't do anything, don't worry about it. Just put out another piece and put out another piece, and you just keep going with it. And so it's been huge. It's been really, really, it's been really entertaining. It's been really, really fun. I've had great messages, heard great stories from people who say, they were inspired by me, and then they went and they lost weight of their own. But then it's also like getting opportunities to meet people and interact with people like you, because if we didn't have social media, like, we would have never connected, right? Because we wouldn't be able to see what's going on. And so that's been one of the best things, connecting. I mean, yesterday, I kind of fangirled it out a little bit because David Goggins commented on my post from our burpees.
Awesome.
And it was, he said something like that was, awesome. He's like, keep working hard or something like that. And I saw it last night.
Yeah, man. That's awesome.
I was like that meme going, ah.
So cool, man.
Yeah.
See, that's a dedication, but it's consistent and persistent, right? And that's what you're doing. You're just constantly putting in the work, and it just grows, right? And that's just everything from what you're doing, man. So where is the next point you're trying to go to with yourself, your business? So talk to me about some of the next. I mean, we have a challenge coming up Saturday. If you want to talk about that,
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the challenge a little bit, because we actually, I mean, maybe people understand the psychosis that goes into coming up with these things. Like, but so we talked about doing step ups, right?
Step ups. Yeah.
And I think you said 5,000, one a leg. I don't know, because I guess we could just scale that to the height, right? So it doesn't really matter how high it is. And so were you planning on doing that on a 20-inch box, or were you planning on doing it at a lower height?
I think I have a bench that would be 20 inch. I'll do it on the bench, this wooden bench thing. I don't have a box here. But yeah, whatever, I think I'll do that. So, I think for this point, it's one of the things, like, you got something to step on, whether it's a stair in your house or it's a stair up into your stoop, where you have to, I don't know, step on your husband or something like that for or just step on, over your dog. It's just about the action of it. But we'll do 5,000 steps or anywhere in between, right? And so, the tier, like, you got 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, anything's accomplishable, and we'll just do the same thing again. So why don't we make it instead of, because it doesn't look like people got it done by midnight, and a lot of people were using midnight. I had a couple of people get it done at like the 11:59 mark for the burpees, which is pretty badass. So why don't we just say 7 a.m. to midnight, or we can even make it 7 to 7 if you want to do that, just so people have a lower time cap.
Let's do 7 to midnight, only because, like, people like yourselves that have, because I don't have any kids, but that have kids.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I know one of the biggest challenges right now is that the kids are home all week, right? And that during the week, because they're still sort of like school, like the weekend comes around and it's sort of, a free for all. And I know time isn't necessarily the same. So, I mean, I think if we do 7 to midnight, that works.
Yeah. It's awesome.
I don't know if you saw, but, yeah. That was awesome, by the way. Your kids doing the burpees.
My 5-year-old did 74 burpees.
Oh my gosh!
I know, because he was tracking them. I wasn't paying attention. He goes, "I did 74." I go, "What?"
Oh my gosh! He's already prepared for his first ultra.
He's getting there. That's what he's doing right downstairs right now, running ultras every day.
He's going to come back and be like, "I did my century. Where are you at?"
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why when you have kids, it's never enough, right? Because when I did the 50, they said, "Why don't you do 100?" And then I did 100, and they said, "Well, why don't you do 1,000?" I said, "Come on, guys." Like at some point, I was like, "Come on, guys, this is getting ridiculous." My 3-year-old and 5-year-old pushing me out. So
that's funny. Well, I mean, look, in terms of business, before all this happened, I've been looking at assisted living businesses, and even before the assisted living, I was starting to think I wanted to transition away from focusing on real estate investing, flipping and the rentals, to really go back to acquiring sort of operating businesses. Because, and it's no secret, but I guess I'm letting the secret out. The same reason there's so much opportunity in the single family space in terms of, and even in the multifamily, is that you have the boomer generation aging and having to transfer those assets. The same thing is happening in the small business world. And when I'm talking small business, I'm talking the traditional SMB, which I think, what is it? It's like under 100 million, I think, in revenue. It's a pretty big number, but in that world, I think it's like 70% of those owners, they don't have succession plans. Because most of them, when they started their businesses, there wasn't this intention of building something big and sustainable. It was just about doing something. And so there's a huge opportunity to get into businesses that are tried and true. And so we were looking at boring businesses like HVAC companies, electrical companies, all of those types of things that cash flow well, that do bad in poor economies. That is where the goal and the target has been. And that's where we sort of ended up really focusing on assisted living, because it sort of married the two together, of real estate and an operating business. And so we are still looking at assisted living. We've been through due diligence on so many deals that we just had to walk away from them. But the opportunity is there for sure. It's just that you have to want to choose to be involved in an operating business, which is a completely different game than just real estate, right? Because 90% of headaches, for most businesses, it has to do with staffing and personnel. And so when you're in an operating business, no matter what, you're always going to have a lot of people involved in it. So
yeah, and it trickles down, right? Because you got now the asset, you got the operations as your property manager now, but now you have the liability, and
yeah, yeah.
you have to phase in. But the model is there that if you can get through those things, just like anything else, if you can get across those points, the grass is green. So
yeah, absolutely. And there's going to be those businesses that are just always there. I mean, I think I'm anything that's in that construction space for the foreseeable future, it's going to be a while before, especially, like mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, like those three businesses, it's going to be a while before robots have the dexterity and then the artificial intelligence to make those small nuanced judgments. Because you think about someone coming to service an air conditioning unit, there's so many things that they have to do. We're so far away from that they're fairly safe into the future. But we've looked at paving businesses, concrete plants, like all kinds of things that are just very much quote unquote boring, that are tried and true. So
that's awesome.
That's where it is.
Good, man. Well, Louis, this has been awesome. I've been looking forward to this. I finally asked you the other day, got you on the show. Super excited you came on. I love your journey. I love everything you're doing. So tell us best place for everybody to find you.
You can find me on Instagram. It's Salty Asian with the number 8 instead of A, because apparently it's not PC. So it's the Salty 8 SIAN, and it's the same on TikTok.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, Louis, I've enjoyed this, man. I enjoy what we're doing, enjoy everything we have. And so everybody who's listening, of course, we have the 5,000 Step Up Challenge this Saturday. Start at 7 a.m. wherever you are, 7 a.m. to midnight. Louis is going to be rocking it out. I'm sure he'll be done by about 10 a.m. knowing him. So the way he's up and going at these things. But we're going to crush this here.
That's right,
Super appreciate you. Super appreciate how we've connected here, our friendship going forward, man. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks a lot, Jason.
Awesome.